Chile here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and this is Mars Hour, Jupiter Day, which is actually Moon Night. Moon in Leo, squaring the Sun, applying to oppose Pluto. And I want to talk about Chiron that Mars rules right now. So this is to um, people that are going through their Chiron in Aries, which would be people around their 50s, and parents to children that have Chiron in Aries, which means parents to children that were born in between around 2018, 19, and pretty much 2026. So, Chiron Aries. Um, Chiron Aries is a wound around the identity, and it can be even the sexual identity of the infant not being accepted, um, or a wound around the way of the person and the mind of the person not being accepted, which means these children could be seen as ignorance when they are brilliant. In fact, I believe that around the 50s, some of these children will bring about, um, because healing is thinking for them, for many of them. I believe some amazing, even revolutionary scientists would be, or artists with Uranus in Taurus, particularly now the Chiron Aries generation. Um, some of them are beyond, are people that are going to shift the way that the world thinks. And funnily enough, the wound is around intellect. If I think about Habermas that has wound of Chiron in Gemini, and his philosophical contribution was the discourse theory, which has to do with communication. And well, he himself had a speech impediment that has to do with ritual abuse, but he can't say it. Now, um, another place where that wound may express itself is where the way of these people or these children might not be accepted or appreciated, which around age 50 could, um, how should I say, lead to some sort of an epiphany, maybe even a societal epiphany. If I think about mundanely, 20 October War of 2023 in Israel was Chiron returned for the October War of 1973, and exact same things where the army had to disobey legal order um happened, and the veterans that tried to warn were seen as the homeless junkies, um, that people did not consider, or that the cops did not consider. They were treating them as some crazy, kind of doubting their intellect. Now, of course, they would have Chiron in different places. They were not infants, but the wound was around, um, first of all, having to disobey legal order, in order to go to treat the invasion, is exactly Chiron Aries, because it's a wound around the military. Um, so more military operations that happened during this time was the war in Ukraine, and the war in Iran, which is also the United States war with Iran and Iraq. Um, so that can be a wound around the way, or the way not being accepted, regarding that operation. Um, so this is something to be taken into consideration when we're talking about infants or children, um, because the societal awareness of that chiron wound can assist to alleviate certain things where, if, for example, there's a wound around the sexual identity of the person, um, one would have to look at chiron and see what was this Chiron aspect in, and it could give us more information. Right now, Chiron is aspecting Aries, which means the wound around the identity can be as a result of the Ubermensch project. I even heard terrible things such as people that were part of the cloning project or a part of the infant engineering project and ritual abuse have no birthright, which I think is utter nonsense. Um, the whole point is that they have a birthright, and if the point was to disown them of birthright, to enslave them, um, then we saw that infants that did not go through ritual abuse, albeit this particular cloning process, were not developing a lot of the wounding or a lot of the issues um, that are also identity issues. And um, Aries can definitely be sexual identity, and definitely we'd have to consider that a wound has resulted um, in sexual identity that was not certainly accepted, and it also can pertain to um, the people that try to define pedophilia as sexual identity, and pedophilia has to do with a wound around the child or the infant being violated without ability to heal or recover, and accepting that that definitely was creating a wound to the sexual identity of the person, and yet we can accept the pedophilic sexual identity, but not the action on it. And um, and this is always something to think with Chiron, because the healing of the wounding needs to be um, and even when people look at the fantasy world to heal a certain wound, um, I saw challenges with that too. I have to admit, um, and because the people that this fantasy would be, let's say, the people that would be considered actors as the child in this fantasy are people that are not in their wounding, that have not gone through the adulting phase, meaning they still have non-erotic infant needs that need to be not violated. And sometimes it's something that people know not in advance. And um, so um, this is something to consider also when we come to talk about the wound around the sexual identity, when we talk about parents to children. There are infants targeted by occult practices that are also of sexual, it's not sexual nature, but they sexually violate the infant. They happen also through the astral. People that have Pisces ascendant, this would be the Hades house, which means that this would be where the infant would physically feel or sense things that are happening in the astral involving it. And this is where the children tend to be diagnosed as neurodivergent when and the targeting of these infants needs to be stopped. Do I know about how to do that? No, and that's a part of the facet of Chiron in Aries. I know that this could be happening. I don't know how um, to stop that for the infants. And to take into account that that infant in its sleep state was exposed to things, and some infants in the physical, and that can be um, now for adults, it means that the head of the baby, the um, the birthing or the head of the baby phase in that child's life was somehow the time where the wound was, or the time where the child was somewhat not accepted. And as adults, as they go through that phase as adults, they might experience that when they try to heal their inner child, they're not accepted being the child in the situation. Now, for some of them, if it's like people that were in Epstein list, it's important to understand that this preventing the person from committing sexual offenses also in the astral, which can be a challenge because they need to be embodied, and to be embodied, to be present in their own body, we need to acknowledge the wounds that happen, the similar wounds that happen to them at the birthing phase, and um, and so that they will have access to their soul inside their body. Um, if people are considering execution, then they should consider euthanasia, and the reason is because that infant never got to be. And so if they decide to do in adulthood, infanticide to prevent harm, um, then euthanasia is more um, than any. I heard that there are places that there are shooting pedophiles in a shooting squad. Definitely, we want to discontinue the behavior of child perpetrators. Um, so not to prolong it to more children, uh, but the understanding of what of these patterns is important to discontinue them, and they are not stemming from anything other than what I just said. And that can also be the point of interference that can create sense of embodiment in one's own identity, um, and thus in one's own sexual identity, um, and honoring the non-erotic phase of the infant can tremendously assist to alleviate. And this is where these people may find that there will be a problem to accept that they are the infant in the situation, particularly if it's adults that have committed crimes. Um, and the, just this awareness that the recovery goes through allowing allowing the state of the head of the baby or the state of the infant in a way that is safe, which is also why they would find it difficult to curate, even as so much as saying that this is their nature. Because when a baby has gone through this level uh, of harm, then to return to the baby state safe is not something that is so, um, in terms of the body and in terms of the psyche or the soul, um, is challenging. And even when they try, when they somehow reaccess it, it can sometimes be not accepted by society. I have Chiron in Gemini, but Mercury that rules it is in Aries. And indeed, I found that when I actually take responsibility and tend to my inner child, then that was not accepted even by therapists that tried to bring the child. And that child was back then rewounded. In my case, I did not um, commit crimes against children, but I can definitely understand with the challenges that it was to allow the infant phase in me. I totally understand how people that went through, let's say, the physical boundary violation did hurt children. In fact, I do believe that if I was physically violated as infant, I would be a pedophile today. Um, because if I would try to go to therapy to heal that wound, they would not accept my infant phase, which would prevent me from healing uh, pedophilia if I was actually physically violated. And for me, I believe that the case was indeed a psychic astral violation, which is terrible enough. But because I was a don't touch me child, then I was not touching either. And because I was not touching, I believe I was not a perpetrator. Not that I had a fantasy to violate, but that um, the irregular patterns of sexuality when it comes to sexual boundary violation could create a child that violates other children. And fortunately, what prevented that was that I was a don't touch me child. And I did grow into a house that was not physically molesting, I believe. Um, because it was hate house, certain things were felt. But in the physical, but that was the identity, which is very similar to the wound of Aries. I was the identity of a child boy that was offender towards an older woman. And this child, he would harm the sexuality of older women. Um, so there was some sort of ritual abuse to do with identity cult that affected me as a child, even though we were not a part of a cult. And then when I would try to go to treat with any wounding that I would have in childhood, then I would not be accepted as the infant because of society that is the Epstein infiltration of the healthcare professions. I accidentally did receive healing for that when I was um, doing a channeling experiment, and there was a kitten, and I felt unsafe. I felt sexually unsafe around literally a kitten, and then I received some healing to that, and it stopped being so. Um, so this is why I say that for people that were actually physical molesters, there definitely is healing. I don't know exactly how do they do that, or how do they provide that healing, or where is it coming from, but I know that it exists. Um, and allowing it's important for the infant phase um, to be without rewounding, and I don't know how to um, um, for the children, for the parents, the children that are infants right now or children right now. It's important to know some of you may run into people that have some sort of similar wound. So it can be either people in their 50s or people which Chiron ruler is in Aries. Okay, it can be, let's say, if it's Chiron Leo, they will have Sun in Aries. If it's Chiron Sagittarius, they would have, or Chiron Pisces, they would have Jupiter in Aries. I have Mercury in Aries, and I have Chiron Gemini. So pay attention if you find a difficulty to accept these people being infants or being children. If you're requiring them to adult, and when it comes to behavior, if there is a behavior to discontinue, accepting their infant self and them having access to the infant self without being raped, in particular, um, is an imperative to stop the unwanted behavior that you're seeking to stop. It doesn't have to be rapey behavior. It can be. Um, Now, there is also, when it comes to the second frontier, to the astral, if two people are tortured, there can be a third entity that would take one's energy and violate the other, and then it seems like they're attacking each other when it's actually somebody else doing that, and that somebody else doing that is obviously not in their best sense of self either. So this, so to stop this, there needs to be access to the infant phase without rape of all the parties involved. And that's relevant um, because right now your infant is maybe going through astral. If it is not related physically, um, then it might go. And you want to really pay attention if the child has um, if anybody is with the child, the person that caretakes the child, and it can even be one of the parents, could be going through such infiltration, and to pay attention that it's torture there. And this can be to the people that treating, let's say, infants or that are left alone with children. They could be suffering from those rituals as well. And so what you would physically see is, let's say, a nanny harms a child where that nanny is mind controlled. Um, I definitely see with people that went through the headless rite. Um, Certain people may involuntarily switch identities with the baby. People that how should I say it? This is related to MK often. I know that there are a lot of people that, whichever was the reason that they thought that they're going to be trained by MK often, or that they were trained by MK often and they didn't know it. I don't know. Um, if they're doing anything that targets individuals, Chiron in Aries is the wound around individuals. This needs to be seized and stopped. I cannot even stress how much. Particularly if they are parents to children that is at the ages where born since to 20 and 18, 19. Um, and this is where the people that have either the ruling of their Chiron in Aries or Chiron return, that are Chiron return around their 50s, but the people that have the ruler of the Chiron in Aries can go to various generations. You would see that the issue that you have with these people is exactly with the issue that pertains to the infant, and 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 that these people need access to their infant stage in a safe way, in a non-abusive way, without being raped. And when they actually say I am the child, or they actually say I am the infant, I am is an Aries statement. It connectly directs. It means that you must accept that, and because this is imperative to prevent the behaviors that you are seeking to prevent. Also regarding your own infant. With your own infant, it's easy to see that I am an. It's easy to see that it is an infant. It's a developmental stage that needs curation, without violating their sovereignty, which is a challenge, without re-victimizing them. That is what will prevent the undesired behaviors, that you seek to prevent. And um, again, if you with MK often he tries to traffic adults. If you try to traffic an adult that has the ruler of the Chiron in Aries, you're trying to traffic an infant. So if you're a parent to an infant, you know, and also think about the fact that this person sees the world from the point of view of an infant that was violated, and wherever they go for cure, they're not being accepted for what they actually need to curate. And this means that the minute they take responsibility, sovereign up and say, okay, I understand what is the problem. Developmentally, around this phase, I am an infant. I need access to me being an infant safely without violation, which I also understand because it's an infant why it's difficult to access this phase. And and because of the Epstein dossiers like infiltration of, it means that both people that were in the Epstein list and their victims that were also of the second frontier need to access the infant phase safely without violation, even in the astral. Um, um, so first of all, if the children as they grow will somehow be in certain phases where they say, I am the child or I am the baby, then it is a calling. It can be, well, for me, I have Mercury there, so it's a verbal phrase, but it can be a behavioral. You want to see where their Mars is. Where the Mars is where they're going to express that in their behavior, and then whatever that Mars is ruled by is also involved with that. Let's say they have um, I don't know, Mars in Aries right now. So they would have sudden phases. It's not their entire life, but sudden phases where they have infantile behavior. And when you see that infantile behavior, it means that they are somewhat brought back to that original wound and somehow need to access that phase of the infant without being violated or not accepted. But infants not being accepted is usually to do with the results of ritual abuse. Okay, when I was born, for example, I have Chiron in the fourth house, Mercury in the second, and according to the if people would take the Aries ascendant, it would be Mercury in the first, Chiron in the third, and there was a wound around my conception, and it resulted of something to do with ritual abuse in both our countries, both my parents' countries, that created eventually circumstances where it would be challenging to accept the infant. Of both and um, and the wound was around the duplication, with Chiron going through the ruler of that. I was learning about the double Dutch and addressing Protestantism and the massacre of the Huguenots. Um, and I don't know if the family was Catholic or Protestant. Um, I'm told Catholic. I don't know. Jungblut. I don't know if the word. Um, and um, and as per the Jewish part, of course, it's yeah. um, but actually, the wounding around the astral issues are to do with priesthood class or or clergy. Um, and and I was discontinuing the wound around the priest. This is why when I did Copernicus chart, I immediately identified that. I did not know it has to do with Aries, and Chiron is creating with Aries now. Um, Aries has to do with the occult rituals that are done also by the clergy to control over the cosmology or the way people see the world, in order to have control over humanity and siphon the energy of people, which is also their identity, their real estate. The children that have Chiron in Aries may experience this wound, but the children with Chiron Aries might be finding the curation to this wound. And they would be some of the greatest scientists that 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 were, um, because discontinuing the pattern of ritual abuse and energy harvesting from the infants is discontinuing anything that, whether it's religion or anything that controls humanity malevolently. And when I was basically a part of the infants of the priesthood class that refused to go by human trafficking or Epstein to Sears infiltration or that type of occult. There were a lot of attempts to make me religious, in which case that would turn me into some sort of a religious priestess, Ghislaine Maxwell, that would be kind of like, all these women whether rabbinical or priesthood or and and this is where when 2007 I said I loved the truth more than I loved my life, and it pertains to these infants. So it has direct connection to the Chiron in Aries. If it is in the ninth house of the parent or the infant, then it can, and or if the moon has, I think navel moon nakshatras, I'm not sure. I know that the moon in Cancer in the middle decan, tropical, would be the sidereal nakshatra that has to do with priesthood class. So if they have the conjoining of these things, um, they may what I'm speaking might be directly resonating with their path, and yet because it is Chiron, they are the wounded healers. So there's always something around this child that they will reinvent curation for these things in themselves. Sadly as it be, because it is a wound. Those the particular children that were born now with the Chiron Aries, um, they want to. I have an episode where I talked about Copernicus and the Epstein infiltration of science. Um, then this is a must see episode. Also take a look at how at the immediacy and the communication, and how I go immediately from intergenerational wealth, where I have Urania in the 8th house in Libra, and then suddenly I run into Aries because I wanted to integrate Aries, and they are basically opposing in my chart. So pay attention to the dynamic that's happening around that broadcasting, because it can give you clues as your child ages, that you will be able to identify that, and 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 to the best of your ability protect the infant in the face of the clergy, in the face of what is the rabbinical, the church, the imams. I believe that around the golden age of the Islamic scholarly thought, we would have a lot of Aries children that are Islamic, and this is very important um, for these children. Right now we have a unique phase where a lot of English-speaking people are either converting to Islam, and so remembering this to protect the children, also in the face of Islam, is vehemently important. In fact, if I can think about the person whose Chiron ruler is co-present with Aries, this was one of the things that they were pushing to curate, which is the Islamic child weddings and the Islamic treatment of the feminine. And um, and I knew another person which Chiron ruler would be co-present with Aries, and they would be. I will address the Lilith Aries later. It's very important. Um, but um, they would be discussing the humiliation, degradation of the feminine, pertaining to the unification of men. They wouldn't say secret societies or masons, but that would be, and they say that they didn't like what the religious people are doing to infants, but they were also used to try to convert people and traffic them. Again, usually following tortures, these things happen. Um, Now, to the Aries Lilith co-presence, um, Aries Lilith co-presence. Um, these are the people that would have insight into the births of the infants, and how is the aristocracy birthing um, affecting, basically the aristocracy birthing. And there is a lot about the Isis and Osiris story. So some of them have Saturn on that on that Lilith Aries. Um, so this can be the aristocracy and the birthings, um, and the woman that would not subjugate could also be the feminine, namely the infant. So the infants that would not subjugate. And this is where, as they come to present their teachings, there could be an issue because of Aries. Um, People might not even know if they are if they are trolling or not. But this is something that tells me that this is absolutely not trolling, and they pertain to the infants. The way the infants resists the things that happen in the birthing of the aristocracy, because Aries has to do with the elite in that particular case, and how it affects. Aries is the scientific endeavor. It's society. It's um, death and rebirth. Um, there are many things there, and because of the nature of society, some of these people had to deliver their information through Lilith archetypes or through the Liliths in society. Um, there is also, yeah, it's and these people have a lot to contribute to the understanding of Lilith in ways that are unprecedented. Um, and of course, the fact that a lot of them are in the aristocracy, and in which makes it difficult for them to speak. But these people, they can have, depending on the house, they can have occultistic knowledge um, behind the creation of Lilith, and the way that the rape of the infants is affecting our perception of Lilith. Um, so right now Saturn is going through some of those Liliths, um, because those would be the Aries Liliths, whether true Lilith or Black Moon Lilith, um, and the people that were born around even the late 60s have Aries co-present there. Bless you. Um, Basically, I think a lot of what I said about Lilith killing the children when they would be born into families where the infant would be harmed and there would be no way out, and so on and so forth, has to do with certain synastries where Aries conjoins my true Lilith. Because I'm that Mars in the ninth house. um, yeah. Uh, to people that have lost infants, if it was like in the 12th or the 8th or whatnot, um, I want you to consider what I said. Consider that that infant could have been targeted and or raped in a way that your family would not have access to stop. And if you have had failed births, or if you have had unwanted abortions, or failed attempts to bring children, I saw mainly boys come into the world in recent times. I know at least one boy that has Chiron Aries conjunction, and that boy was also born when Venus was with Ennebalgidi. I'm not going to say because I don't address charts of infants publicly, but this is, and there were a lot of times, there are a lot of things. If I can think about um, what was happening around birds and so on and so forth, the things that were coming out, but this can be, particularly with Venus Denebalgadi, it can be people that re-honor the feminine, even as boys. I was, for example, supposed to be a boy, and I came out as girl. But I came out to Jewish family where if I would be boy, at 8 days they would be expecting that my genital mutilation for the boys. In Islamic tradition, for example, it could be boys. If no, but they have it also to the girls, which is beyond terrible. And this can cause kidnapping of infants or killing of infants. They think about. I don't know if in Palestine there are tribes that would do genitalia mutilation for the girls. If they are, it can explain the rates of child death in the genocide in Palestine. If because um, but uh, but even as girl, I would have my inner boy with me, and my inner boy was even more feminist because it understood that to be a boy it needs to honor the feminine, and I need to be safe to be also a woman. I need to be safe to be a woman also if I'm a boy in terms of gender. But I also suffered from the issues that were the prejudice around the feminine, um, which unfortunately caused a lot of suffering for me. Um, because there were attempts to control the birthing, there were interference in the fifth vital sign, also to occultistic stuff. Um, there were times where I would be suicidal around the fifth vital sign, and even times where I was thinking to stop and those things. Learning about the importance of the fifth vital sign was very, very benefic to me. Um, but this was also to do with agendas of femicide in society. This is why I said the infants who were born with Venus, Denebalgidi, and Chiron Aries, they're like the antidote. And the parents should protect their honoring of the feminine. Because Venus, Denebalgidi is the protected feminine, but also the feminine is the underdog. I'm not saying that these children are going to be gay or anything like that, but that even a straight man um, honors their feminine, like and this is something that I immediately think about. Um, More things that I can think about with this Chiron Aries. Oh, Aries is the mind and the intellect, and we can have Chiron. We can have um, a wound. Mars is a telos, so we're gonna have a non-linear thinking, and I want to emphasize that this non-linear thinking um, is going to be so profoundly transformative of the sciences and the arts, and at the same time we don't want to glorify the nonlinear thinking, because the healing the wound might be to do with that nonlinear thinking. For example, for me, learning about quantum chaos, even though I'm not a mathematician, was tremendously regulating of my nervous system. I also have Aquarius 12th house, which means that the mental health to do with nervous system regulation, to do with studies, because Saturn in the ninth, and nonlinear dynamic systems is exactly chaos or quantum chaos. Um, but the wound around the probability is also a numeric wound, which is Chiron Gemini, with Mercury in Aries is the telos, and it's a non-linear numerical systems. For example, astrology, and and this is um, the people that were born with Chiron Aries. They're going to have some sort of a non a telic non-telic thinking. It now a part of it is as a result of the wound, but a part of it is the curation to the wound. So this non-telic thinking or non-linear thinking, um, and they might have a non-linear behavior, which may be um, expressing itself in various ways. As these people come to be adults, there can be a wound around intimacy when there is a non-linear dynamism regarding the sexual energy, and that can be a challenge in forming sexual identity, or the yes, no, and maybe. Um, and whenever they experience that, they need to think about the infant phase and trying to access the infant phase in a not rapey situation. It's one of the things that were the most challenging to me with Mercury in Aries ruling over Chiron in Gemini. Because Aries is the sign of the self, although it is not Taurus, it can also be experienced in the self exploration of sexuality, that can happen in anomalies regarding the ages because of those violations, and it can happen in the infant stage. So it's both about not shaming, and here is the thing, to make sure that the child is not violent towards themselves. If you see a child, I don't know, leaning their genitalia very strongly against a chair or something like that, then to make what you will need to regulate is that they might become aggressive with themselves, and this is where you want to prevent them being aggressive with themselves. This is how you might see that as parents. Also, their moves, their touch might be, they can be motoric, but this is more pertaining to the Mercury. They can be motoric, irregulation of the energy, um, that can be seen as motoric challenges because of these anomalies in the life energy. Now, again, I want to emphasize this. Do not rely on developmental anything. This is where they want to target the child for the peterings. Okay? I'm not saying go to the developmental phase or what. No, 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 no. In fact, the current methods to heal those things are not there yet. Your child will develop them. You might want to learn from experience of other people and sort the wheat from the chaff, because with Chiron it is always individually based. And at any case, never to leave your child alone with somebody that's supposed to know, whether it's priest or doctor or I don't know what. When it comes to medicating these children, again, think a billion times over what I said. And in any case, any form of medication or behavioral issue should not be about trying to get that child to behave without abolishing the targeting of this child. And know that that targeting is funded by classified project budget. Mars is also a fiscal sign that pertains to everybody's sovereignty. Yes. Mm-hmm. נו, שימי את הקרם שלי. שמתי, זה עזר. אוקיי, שימי עוד. אפשר לקחת את זה? כן. יש עוד משהו? So, yeah. One of the things that I was extremely fortunate, when I was around kindergarten, we went to some sort of something, I don't remember what doctor even. He identified that I had something to do with the motoric difficulty, and something to do that can pertain also neural activity, something to do with ADHD. Fortunately, he told my mother, just know that it exists, know that it can create, the tender motorics can be, so if the child is expected to do tender motorics, then know that it is difficult for this child to do these tasks, but that's it. Keep the child normal. He was not prescribing any drugs, not anything. And it's one of the most fortunate things that happened, because it was a juncture where I could have been ritually abused in the physical rituals. Then you would hear about me as a Mark Dutroux, as an Epstein. If I would not die, then those would be my venues to remain alive. Or probably as a Ghislaine Maxwell. Although I could probably be, with forced gender change. Even a prime minister. um, or celebrity or whatnot. But that is, as infant, I saw the Disney, and I saw something to do with mathematics. And indeed, I have Rahu Chiron in Gemini, and Gemini is a numeric. I remember one of the people that I taught English, there was attempt to, they were asking me if I can teach mathematics, and I said I have a challenge, and then the child would see numbers as images. But then the satanic cults try to get at these children, and then I would be severely attacked. I remember I saw car plates with the numeric 666 all over the car plate, and I was like, what the fuck is that? But that's, and the parents had to do with the industry of the infrastructure and the water industry. And later I could not anymore communicate with those children. One of these children introduced me to Olivia's witchcraft and subliminals. Um, um, there is something around the wound of the how, even when we do feminism with, let's say, refining Crowley, we have to sort the wheat from the chaff, when it comes to um, not harming infants, and this is um, and this is important to address. um, any form of sex trafficking